Let's talk about why inflation feels so much worse than what the government tells you it is. The answer is because it is so much worse than what the government tells you it is, for two reasons. One, the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which is the government's official measure of inflation, which tells you prices are going up like 3% a year, is a total lie. And the reason for that is the government constantly swaps what products are in the basket of goods that are described by CPI to keep the prices down. So the first thing they do, for example, if you like once a month to buy a nice juicy prime steak that costs $20, and then that steak gets so expensive it goes up to $30 or $40 and you can't afford it anymore and you just buy ground beef instead, the government will say, oh, wow, it looks like consumer choices have changed. Nobody actually wants to buy steaks anymore. They prefer ground beef, and the government will adjust the measure of inflation. And instead of having the price of steaks in the measure, they will have the price of ground beef in the measure. And they will presume that you are happy because you are buying what you wanted, when the truth is you're not buying what you wanted. You're buying what you were forced to buy because the government kept you from buying what you really wanted to buy it because it's too expensive. So the number one way that the government rigs the inflation statistics is by continually and constantly swapping out the products that they use to measure inflation by constantly switching from more expensive products to less expensive products. So they're constantly switching from what you wanted to buy into what you were forced to buy. And the government says, well, you're still spending about the same amount of money on groceries. So I guess inflation's only going up X percent, because the truth is you're only spending that much more. And the truth is, no, what I wanted to buy was way more expensive than that. I couldn't afford it. And so I bought something else instead. And the government says, well, we only measure inflation by what you actually buy, not what you wanted to buy or what you could have bought in the past. Okay, so that's the number one reason. The second is the government excludes from the measure of inflation all of the things that go up a lot in value when they print a ton of money. Give me one second. For example, the government excludes the cost of stocks, like on the stock market, and they exclude the price of buying your own home. So if you're, freshly minted right out of college and you're looking at the cost of everything and saying, I don't have, I'm buying stocks at exorbitant valuations. Not sure how I'm going to get a return on investment on these. The, starter homes are insanely expensive. Not sure how I'm ever going to afford that. If that is the way you feel, the answer is those things are not included in inflation. So the price of a house can double, and the government's going to tell you inflation's still only 3% because they don't measure the cost of buying a house. Now, there is some measure for rents and that sort of thing, but the major costs associated with buying a house and being on the receiving end of huge price appreciation because you own assets that are going up, that is not counted in inflation. So if you already own a house and it doubles in price, that's not reflected in inflation. So good for you, but it means it's leaving behind all the people that did not already own the asset. And same in the stock market. If you could afford to own a bunch of stocks and bonds before inflation ate you alive, well, good for you. Your stock portfolio might have doubled over the last 5 or 10 years. But what about all the people who couldn't afford a nice, big, cushy stock portfolio prior to the last 5 or 10 years? Those people are stuck buying stocks and bonds and stuff right now when the prices are exorbitant. And so anybody right now is getting totally screwed. So there's a great website called WTF Happened in 1971. So that website, WTF Happened in 1971. And it shows a beautiful chart of basically all the ways the average people have been screwed since 1971, which is when the United States came off the gold standard and started just printing fiat dollars, to infinity. And it shows how human productivity used to track very accurately with human wages. So as humans became more productive, they got paid more. And in 1971, it suddenly diverges where human productivity keeps going up very steadily, but human wages level off, meaning people are not getting paid for their productivity. And that's because wages are constantly being undermined by the government printing more money. So the short take is, if you think wealth inequality is a problem, the primary driver of wealth inequality is government money printing, is the debasing of the money supply, because it means the people that are living paycheck to paycheck, or the people who can only afford to save up small amounts of money, are constantly getting their assets eroded. Meanwhile, all of that new money printing that the government is doing, it's mostly driving the price of stocks and real estate and other assets like that higher. For example, gold and Bitcoin. So those assets are going up, but if you don't already own those assets, they're getting higher and more out of reach. The one asset that I don't think is out of reach yet is Bitcoin. I feel like in a world where stocks and real estate and all of the other things you could buy, including gold, to try to insulate you from inflation, in a world where all of that is out of reach, Bitcoin is still very much in reach for the average person, because you can buy any amount of it. It's not like a house where you have to have a huge down payment and a high net worth to even afford it in the first place. It's not like real estate. It's not like a big stock portfolio. So Bitcoin is the best way of insulating yourself from government money printing, and it's available to everyone. So it's the best antidote